Hello, everyone. Happy International Women's Day. I'm Deanna Kosaraju. I'm the founder of Global Tech Women, and welcome to Voices 2014. We're here to celebrate the accomplishments of women in technology, to talk about your passions and your dreams for the coming year and beyond. So we have people coming in from all over the world. It would be great if you can use the chat window on the right-hand side to introduce yourself, talk about what you're passionate about. This is an opportunity for all of you to network. If you created an account here in Spreecast, you can go ahead and use that chat window. And I hope that you do. Last year at Voices version 1.0, we had a lot of amazing conversations. And in fact, a group from India and Pakistan have developed some kind of collaboration. So it's been really great. So a couple of housekeeping tips. This is probably your first time in Spreecast, so I want to let you know a couple of things. We've already covered that you need to log in to participate in the chat, as well as to answer or to ask questions. So if you look below Stacey and me here, there's a question box. So if you have questions as Stacey is going through her presentation, please use the question box. And what they do is they queue up, and then when Stacey's ready for questions, I will select some of the questions for her, and then she will go ahead and answer them. So we may not be able to get to all of the questions, but we'll try to get the questions that most people are wanting and try to group them together as best we can. This link is recorded, so that URL that you see on the top of the browser in about 30 minutes to 1 hour after the session is over, that will be a recording available for you and for you to share with other people if you found this an interesting conversation. It's a great way to share this link with others. People have held brown bag lunches and watched sessions together and talked about the outcomes, and it's really been a great way to network with other women. Your feedback is always welcome. This is the second iteration of Voices, and we've learned a lot of things from the first one, but there's always much more to learn as technology advances and as we advance as women in tech. So always interested in hearing your feedback. I will be sending out a survey at the end, but don't wait for that. You can email me at deanna@globaltechwomen.com if you have any suggestions at all. I'm happy to hear your feedback and your ideas for our speakers, for ideas, what we could possibly do for Voices 3.0. It's hard to think about right now, but it's going to be here before we know it. So if you want to get involved, we would love to have you as well. Lastly, the hashtag for Voices is hashtag Voices2014. A lot of us are taking selfies during these conference sessions and posting them up there on the Twitter feed. If you want to take a look, there's some pretty funny ones already. And we would encourage you, if you're with a group, take a selfie with all of you and post it online. We want to see everybody participating. So with that, I would like to introduce you to Stacey Sargent, the CEO of Connect Growth and Development. You know, I've been in tech a long time, and I knew about the imposter syndrome, and I knew about my belief sometimes that I was not good enough to do certain tasks. And then I heard Stacey's session, and she described, you know, what types of inner critics there are and how you can dissect them and figure out how to diffuse them. And I had never thought about that before I heard Stacey's session, and it's really helped me go a long way. In fact, this conference would not have been possible without listening to Stacey's sessions and reading her book. So I I really want to thank her, and I think having her here first is a great way for us to think about what is possible, because oftentimes we limit ourselves even before anyone else gets an opportunity to do that. So we need to take care of our own mind first before we go on to those things that we really want to accomplish. So with that, I am going to let Stacey take over. I will be off air, meaning I'm going off camera, but I am still here fielding the questions and monitoring the chat. So I will be here, Stacey. You just won't be able to hear me. So here you go.
Thanks, Deanna. Hi, everybody. I feel so privileged to be the first speaker in this Voices conference. I love the reach of Voices. I love that we can all come from wherever we are, Romania, San Francisco, I've seen already. Um, and I'll let you know that I am coming to you from Lewiston, Idaho, in the United States. And I am actually sitting at the Oncology Center in Lewiston. My mom is here getting some treatment today, and this is I don't want that to be a sad thing. I want that to be a cool thing that because of technology, because of the kind of work that women do in technology, I'm able to both be with my family and do the work that I absolutely love, which is helping women thrive in their leadership. So, cheers to all the women and men who make this technology possible. I'm very thankful for it so that I can be here. Um, so fantastic to get started for the Voices Conference. I'll just do a very, you can read my bio, but just quickly, Stacey Sargent. I have been doing leadership and team focused work for about a decade, and it is the work love of my life. There's nothing greater to me than being with a team or with a leader or with a group of women and watching them grow and learn over time. It's thrilling to me. My company is called Connect Growth and Development. I'm based in Seattle, Washington, although my family lives here in Idaho and I have traveled to see them frequently. And just a small background, very quick, on the inner critic, inner success. It's based on this book. I actually have a copy with me today. Whoa, there we go. I did a speech in 2009 at the Microsoft Women's Conference. Lynn Walker is on the cast today. She gave me the spot there. And I spoke about managing the inner critic in committee, and it had such a tremendous response. It even surprised me, frankly. And more and more people kept saying, "Wow, we just need more information on this." Somebody encouraged me to write a book, The Librarian at Microsoft. Um, and so, dealing with a lot of my own internal critics about not being a writer, I did write a book. It published last October. Um, but I've been much more so than the book. Uh, I've been doing work with clients for a decade, and really, to me, all my leadership and teamwork seems to come down to the two aspects of ourselves where we're thinking about what is success and what is success, not only what our company thinks and what our job and our career, but what do we feel is success internally. And when I work with teams, either one-on-one in coaching or facilitation, I'm asking them these questions. And invariably what kept happening is as we would define what success was, sort of instantaneously, those nasty little inner critics would come up. Um, and so they really, to me, in a relationship, I often I'll do this. They're sort of in a relationship with each other where we think about success, we think about what we want to achieve in our life, and then our fears and our doubts creep in. So it's a dynamic relationship that, as a behavioral scientist, I'm very curious about. Well, I'm curious about it, and frankly, sometimes it really just makes me angry and ticks me off. So um, in the session today, Deanna and I brainstormed how this would be most effective. And one of the things we thought is often when I'm in sessions, the critic gets so much airtime because I think most of us have it. And so we split this session into two. And today's will be more focused on the inner critic and identifying it and thinking about how you can combat the inner critic. And then there's also another partner session later. For me, it's Saturday, I think at 3 o'clock Pacific time, if I'm not mistaken. And in that session, we're going to focus on the inner success side. So they're really partnered sessions. So hopefully you can make it to that one as well. Um, so without further ado, there's also a PowerPoint presentation, and I'll be using that as I go along. You don't have to have it, but it can be useful to you, and I wanted people to have something to use for themselves. The other thing that's unique is I am also uh, I would love to work with people live in the session on their inner critic. I have a colleague that I work with that will be joining us on Saturday to do some live coaching. But if you have some things you'd like to talk about or have me address, please feel free to do that. So if you look on the second slide in the presentation titled The Book, The Voices Session, what I did was I outlined the book. So those sub-bullets are really the chapters in my book. And then what I did was I highlighted what we were going to talk about in these sessions. So this really serves as the agenda. And yeah, I just want to make a note here for folks. I'm not running the slide. You actually just pull it up yourselves, and I'll try to remember to tell you where I'm at in the slide deck. But you'll be responsible. You're responsible for your own world, so you can advance the slide as needed. So today we're going to talk about the inner critic cast of characters. I know for me, sometimes I think I have a whole chorus line complement of inner critic characters going on in my mind, but I tended to notice only a few. And then we'll talk about actually something that I think is useful is instead of trying to avoid or move away from the inner critic, one of the crazy theories I believe in is that you should dive far into your inner critic because it has really useful information. And the better we get to know it, the better we have to be prepared for it. And the goal for me is not necessarily to stop the inner critic. I haven't figured out how to do that quite yet. But the goal is to catch it earlier and take that energy from negative and channeling it in a much more useful way. So just know that that's the goal. I believe that there are ways that we can catch our inner critic earlier, and the best way to do that is to know it and know what trips it up. And then be prepared with some tools, very practical tools to address the inner critic. And then on the inner success side, I have the same belief that we need tools and techniques to help us get very clear about what success means to us. And if we are, that actually combats and fights down the inner critic. So I'm going to move forward to slide. Let's see, there's beautiful slide 3, which is the title slide, but I'm really going to focus on slide 4. What I'd love to have folks do is as I go through these 6 classic critics, in the chat room, feel free to share which of the classic critics fits you. Or what I can tell you is don't be shy, don't be embarrassed, don't think you're the only one. Because when I did the first speech at the Microsoft conference, 800 women stood up when I said, has anybody ever heard the inner critic voice? 800 women said yes. I think every single person has some form of this. And I often get the question, do men have it too? Yes, they totally do. They just handle it a little bit differently than women. Um, so anyway, feel free to share inner critic thoughts with your peers. So the first one is what I call the perfectionist. That's pretty familiar in the media. The perfectionist is, of course, somebody who believes they have to do things, anything, everything perfectly. And if they don't do it perfectly, like one smidge less than perfectly, it's complete failure. Hello, my name is Stacey Sargent. I'm a perfectionist. This is one of the top inner critics that I tend to struggle with. I actually think I struggled more with the perfectionist in my 20s and early 30s than I do now. We have to call that the beauty of aging. I have other critics that I focus on more now. And the other thing that can happen with perfectionists is if you believe that you're not going to be able to do it perfectly, you'll withdraw and not even try at all. And I think I've been doing some reading lately on women and the idea of confidence versus confidence, especially when it relates to applying for jobs. Some of the studies show that if a woman doesn't meet all of the criteria in the job description, she won't even apply. Whereas men, if they meet 40 to 50% of the job criteria, they will apply. I think you could see this as a perfectionist tendency, perhaps, where we want to be great at everything. And I know even there's a great interview that was done with Virginia Rometty, the CEO of IBM, where she was being recruited by somebody for a big job, a big step in her career. She told the recruiter, I'm not sure if I'm ready for this. I'm going to think about it. She went home and talked to her husband, and her husband was like, "Are you crazy? You have to go for this job. Do you think a guy would not take this job when they weren't perfectly ready?" And so she talked about in that interview how she's learned that growth and comfort don't coexist. You actually have to take the risk to not know something perfectly. So that's a little bit of perfectionist. If you feel like you have perfectionist tendencies, feel free to shout out and open yourself up to our friends in the chat room. The next one is called, I call it the do it all driver. And the driver is, I think, similar to the perfectionist with some key differences. The driver is really about somebody who has this long list of things to do, and they have to finish everything on the list. And if they don't finish everything on that list, then that's a failure. The difference is they don't have to do it perfectly, but they have to do everything. This might sound familiar in moments of saying, well, I have to get all of these things done today. And if I don't get it done today, just, that's it. That's it. Show's over. Um, it can also show up as being somebody who feels like they have to do everything on their own. That it's very hard to delegate and give others time to do things. Because if it's not done, if the task doesn't get done or doesn't get done in the way you want it to get done, then that's completely bad. Excuse me. And don't get me wrong, I actually think the critics can sometimes help us in a way. My perfectionist, my driver tendencies in my 20s got me promoted. I worked my buns off. I was working very long weeks because I always wanted to exceed everybody's expectations, and I got promoted for it. So sometimes the critic can serve you, but what I'm really wanting to approach is when do those critic messages become less healthy or less in service of you? So while being a driver and wanting to get everything done can be fine and it can be used as a motivation, when does it flip over and become something where you beat yourself up for not getting everything done or for not getting it done perfectly? The next one I'm going to talk about is in the lower left of the screen, the fake fraud. This is also called the imposter syndrome. There was a study done in a dissertation written in 1978 by two women who studied academic women and found that imposter syndrome or feeling like a fake fraud is so incredibly prevalent. Up to 70% of people feel like a fraud. So this might sound like, well, wow, they're going to find out that I'm not as smart as they think I am. Or, that really wasn't me. That was my team. I wouldn't have been able to do it on my own. The fake fraud, we just don't believe in our own capability. We question our own capability. And I have felt this, especially I work a lot in high tech companies, Microsoft, Amazon, Raytheon, Expedia. And for men and women, I think the imposter syndrome, the feeling like a fake or a fraud, is very high on the scale of prevalence. Um, and so I think it's an important one to learn to combat. I often will suffer from fake fraud, sometimes actually quite often, before I go off to speak or stand up in front of a group of people. Especially if I've been listening to other speakers, I'll think, oh gosh, I can't believe they let me into this conference. I can't believe Deanna put me here in front of you. Um, I have those tendencies too. And so there are techniques that I use to combat those that I'll share. So if you've ever experienced fake fraud, feel free to, again, share about that in the chat room. I think the sharing of our inner critic is actually one of the techniques to take the steam out of it because I do an exercise with groups where I have them write their inner critic messages and then I have them share them in the room. And I hadn't told them that first. Deanna and Caroline Samard on the call, and I think Lynn have all gone through this uh, before. And what happens is when people get freaked out, they're like, I can't believe I didn't have to share this. But after they've read all the inner critic messages, what happens is people go, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who feels this way. Sharing about it is such an important aspect of this. So next, let's talk about the pleaser. The pleaser inner critic voice would be something like, well, if I have to do this because if I do, then they'll like me or they'll appreciate me. And if I don't, they won't like me. They won't appreciate me. Or I need to do something like this for my boss because they just depend on me. A pleaser is also somebody who may not love to rock the boat, and so they work uh, on pleasing folks and keeping things steady. I'm actually what I'm doing is I'm looking at in my book I have little bullet points of the voices of the all of the characteristics and just looking it up and making sure that I'm covering all the right ones for the pleaser. I just want everyone to be happy. A good person would do this. Gosh, if I agree to this request of my boss, I'm going to be stressed out. I already have 3 things to do, but I can't say no. They're really depending on me, or they may not want to work with me again. That could be the pleaser. One thing that's sometimes interesting for folks is I talk about the two ends of each spectrum. And the pleaser, while the perfectionist may give up doing things if they can't do it perfectly, the pleaser may actually turn into the opposite of the pleaser, sort of the jerk or um, the ITCH or the someone that's just not great. But they're doing it actually because internally they're just so sure that people aren't going to like them or accept them or appreciate them. They're so sure of that they self-sabotage. They just make sure somebody's not going to like them. So that actually can be a pleaser inner critic too. um, the next one that I'll talk about, lower right side of slide 4, the comparer. Boy, let me tell you, this one is a huge one for me. um, and this is the one that ends up happening for me in this. I'm 45 right now, so uh, one of the things that I experience is having had some success in having reached some career goals that I want to. Instead of being perfectionist or driver, now I tend to compare myself more to other people. What have they achieved at this stage? Or they have a bigger following on social media. Oh my gosh, that just drives me crazy. I don't have enough Facebook likes. I look at another person, they have tons of Facebook likes. Well, gosh, I'm probably not as good as them. I'm not as savvy as them. Um, I think this happens with the physicality, of course. If I go to the gym, what am I doing? I'm constantly measuring myself against every other person in the room. Um, so I think the compare can be very common as well. And here's what I hear in the tech world is, well, I don't know that technology enough. I'm not good enough at that technology. I'm not as good as so and so. Or, um, you know, this guy that I work with, he's just such a natural in the meeting. I'm just not like that. I wish I were more like him, or I wish I was less like him. So that's how the compare shows up. And the last one that I have that I've classified as the saboteur, I like to call the saboteur the general purpose critic. So anything that's going well or moderately good, the saboteur comes in and say, well, it's probably, it's sort of like, when is the other shoe going to drop? The saboteur just finds any way to cut into it. So if you got a promotion, the saboteur inner critic might be, well, gosh, that's great, but what if you don't prove yourself? Or you finally are going to take that vacation. Wow, gosh, yeah, vacation will be fun, but what if everything goes to heck while you're gone? The saboteur is just, I sort of think of it as, have you ever heard of like death by paper cut? Just tiny little slices happening all the time that undermine your confidence and your ability to go after things. Um, so, they're frustrating. Are these the only ones? No, of course not. Do most people suffer from just one? No. And the goal of this is, for me, my goal in sharing these with you is to identify and name the critic. Actually, one of the ways, one of the tools and techniques I talk about to take the steam out of your critic is to name it. In fact, I have a client who named her critic Bettina. I have another person I just was talking to the other day. She has 2 primary critics, and she gave them like um, twin names. I can't even remember, like Nancy and Fancy. I don't know. But what happens is when you name it, one of the things that happens is it's not stuck in the brain. Then you actually pull it out of you and it becomes something else. You realize that it's not all of you, it's just a part of you. And it helps your brain separate it from all of you. So if it's useful, name your critic character, give them a persona. I actually have exercises for this in the book. And actually, it's interesting to see how much power your critic has. I had that client um, act out Bettina. We actually did the role play. I said, how does Bettina stand? How does she look? What's her voice sound like? And when she acted it out, it was amazing because Bettina is one powerful, very assertive woman. And I wish I would have had a mirror in the moment to hold up to my client because I wanted to share with her, like, wow, if you, client, who has all of this power and all this capability, you just use it against yourself negatively with negative voices. What if you took that power, that certainty, and actually made it your partner and put it on your side? So that can be another, that's, we're really already into the tool set around naming, claiming, and taming the inner critic. So identify what classic it is, identify, maybe give it a name, find out what it's like so that you can separate it from yourself. Feel free to ask questions using the questions, the blue question button below me. And then Deanna can put them up. I'm checking the chat wheel as we go through this. Um, and Monica said, I have every critic. Yeah, me too, absolutely. One of the things I did recently was might sound funny as impact, but I stack ranked my inner critics by how much energy each one was taking from me. And I was surprised because I thought that I had been, perfectionist and comparer would be the top one. And actually, it was the fake fraud that was sort of running the show, which helped me because then I did some different things in taming the critic. So I do think it can be very useful to capture these. Another thing, we won't do it today in the session, but of course, give me 1 second. I'm just going to cough, so I'm going to mute myself. Great time to chat. Okay, that's better. Okay, that sounds like the sound was getting fainter, so hopefully I'm going to pull this up. So before we go on to another exercise, one of the things I'd like you to do is think about the most recent inner critic message that you were telling yourself. Could have been 20 minutes ago, it could have been 2 days ago. So think about what is an inner critic message that you told yourself recently. And if you can, take a couple minutes to identify, like, what's that concise message that it was trying to tell you. It could be as general as I'm not smart enough. It could be I don't, you know, people don't listen to you in meetings, or you're invisible. So think about what that message is. And if you know what in that message, what triggered the inner critic, what made it show up. For example, I have a client who he has an inner critic around fake fraud, not being smart enough. And when we tracked with the triggering events, we found out that his triggers weren't happening with his peers, it wasn't happening with his direct reports. It was mainly happening in meetings where it was a skip level, where 2 levels above him, more senior for him, were in the room. And so we worked more specifically in those instances because they tend to have uh, more power over him. So it can be very useful to figure out what triggers you, what that message is. And another piece in the book that I'm very, I'm a big believer in emotional intelligence and expanding our emotional intelligence. And so I have people track. I draw a circle and I have them track what am I thinking, which is your inner critic message typically. I have them track what am I feeling, and the four most common base feelings are mad, sad, glad, and afraid. There's lots of other descriptions, um, but they often go back to these bases. And then what is your body doing in response to the inner critic message? So you have butterflies in your stomach. I often rub, sorry, I'm trying to get in this. I rub my fingers a lot, or I am very kinetic, so I start fidgeting more in my feet. And so one of the, I'm just going to use myself as an example here. One of my most recent inner critic messages was, um, I'm not doing enough for my mom. I'm here visiting her. So it was literally, it was last night. She got up and she was like, "Oh, I'm going to make dinner." And "No, Mom," I just thought, "Oh gosh, I'm sitting here working. I'm not doing enough for my mom. And she has cancer." And that's what was going on. And I got fidgety. I got up. I went into the kitchen with her. I was moving around. And finally she said, "What are you doing? Will you get out of here?" And I was laughing. And I tried to, what is the feeling going on with me? So I knew I was thinking that I wasn't being helpful enough to my mom. That was coming from my rational brain. My body was really fidgety and nervous. And the feeling that was going on was, I think it was more related to afraid, I'd have to say. Nervous, worried, wanting to make sure that I was doing enough. So tracking those things can be really helpful to get you more information about your critic in and of itself. And that's really I think I would say one of the most important things you can do to begin to tame your inner critic and shift its energy is to become incredibly self-aware about your critic. So watch it, become an anthropologist, become the researcher, observer of it, um, so that you know when does it happen, and you're looking for those leverage points, like my client, skip level meetings for him. That's where we had him do his practice, because when the energy is really pronounced around an inner critic, that's the place to do your practice, because on those less energy times, the practice is going to come along naturally. Um, so hopefully everybody's had time to come up with a message. I see some people are posting them in the chat room. Thank you. That's fantastic. Everybody understands this but me. It must just be me. I'm not the, I just don't get it. That, yeah, it happens a lot with me. Um, So I'm going to work on a tool to help combat that. And I'm just going to check. I'm actually not seeing it visually, but if my client Jane Bove is in the room, can you type in the chat room, Jane? Let me know if you're here or not. The Show Me the Data chapter in the book is really about tools and techniques to work with the inner critic. And one of them is, well, I sort of enjoy slide 6. Don't believe everything you think. So here's the deal about the rational brain, tech ladies and ladies who support tech, and any men who are listening. Your rational brain is a great, powerful tool, but it's not always right. I know it's shocking, right? So we often, those inner critic messages, we're thinking about them, but they're not correct. They're not actually accurate. Our rational brain can trick us. And so the tool that I'm going to use with Jane is to walk through actually it's a very rational process to help combat the critic. It's sort of like being in a debate competition with the critic, and you're going to win, trust me. And so one of the things about the inner critic is it has a very general, generic message. So, for example, mine, I'm not doing enough for my mom. What I need to do is figure out um, more about that. When the inner critic message is very general, very high level, for example, I'm lazy, I'm not smart enough, everybody thinks I'm stupid. That's a very big general message. And what we want to do is break it down into smaller bits and bytes of data so that we can actually take action. Because what happens is we get swirling and swirling and swirling around in our brain with these inner critic messages, and that's not action. That doesn't help anything. It just actually makes it worse. We just spin and spin and spin. So this technique is meant to get you from that swirling and spinning to be more specific about what your inner critic message is and how to track it. So I'm going to focus on slide 7. And Jane, let's have you come online and just do a quick test here of your microphone. Jane, are you there? Deanna, we might need your help in Jane's microphone, or if she can be heard. Yes, you can put her online.
Hi there.
Jane,
Hi.
hi.
Can you hear me okay?
I can. Deanna, are folks hearing Jane okay?
Can you
Great.
guys hear me?
Yeah, they can, Jane. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, great. Everything's working.
Can you hear me?
Technology, fantastic. Yes,
Okay.
great. So, Jane, can you just introduce yourself really quickly to the folks?
Yes, I work at Microsoft. I work in partner integrations, and I was fortunate enough to meet Stacey at a women's conference and wanted to hire her immediately on the spot. Read the book and used it as a framework, and it's helping me every day.
Oh, thanks, Jane. So, folks who are listening, Jane was the volunteer. I wanted to live coach somebody through this so that you get a feel for what it is instead of just me trying to represent. And Jane, courageous, brave, front runner of supporting women, and she volunteered and said yes. So we're all sending you good wishes and thankfulness,
Thank
and
you.
much namaste, Jane. So the other thing about Jane is, as we're working through coaching, she walks in with her book, which is hilarious, and she's got all these post-it notes and everything in it, like Jane does her work. It's very gratifying for me because, frankly, I did not like writing the book that much. But so it's nice to see somebody using it. Okay, so Jane, what's the inner critic message we're gonna use with you today?
Similar to everybody who's been on the chat thread, I tend to see a lot of them, and at different times, different ones exposed. But I think the one that today resonates with me is fake and fraud.
Okay.
I have this fear that, oh my God, they feel like I'm a fake in this role. How did she get to that level? How did she get to that title? And someone's going to figure it out and say, somebody messed up.
Yeah, yeah. Right. And so, what's the message in your head that you're telling yourself in those moments? What's the inner critic message?
The message that I hear is, oh my God, maybe there was a mistake. And I start thinking back about, well, maybe they didn't think about these things. And all the people who criticized and said about this project and that project, maybe they were right. And instead of looking in the mirror, maybe I was looking out the window and didn't really see myself in the right way. So I think I've thought about this before, where you look in the mirror and say to yourself, am I looking at a circus mirror and a warped vision of myself, or am I really being honest with who I'm seeing?
Yeah, boy, I bet tons of people can resonate with that. So the message I think I want to work with you is, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not the right person for this job, or is it that I'm not the right person in this meeting? Which one's a little bit more correct?
Um, what was the second one?
Well, I want to get very clear on the message we're going to work with. And it sounded like it is, maybe they're right that I'm not good at this job.
Exactly.
Is
I'm
that the
not good
message?
enough. I'm not good enough for this job.
I'm not good enough for this job. Okay. So, folks, the True Series questions are a series of 4 questions. And the first one I'm going to ask Jane is, I'm not good enough for this job. Is that 100% true? Yes or no?
No.
No. Okay. Now, folks, this is an important part of the questions, this yes or no version, and this is actually adapted from Byron Katie's work. Um, it's really helpful because it actually sets the rational brain in motion to answer. So, is it 100% true that Jane's not the right person for the job? No, that's not 100% true. And it sets the brain up to respond to the second two questions. And the second two questions, you can either ask them separately, but it ends up that most often we're answering them in parallel. So, Jane, if it's not 100% true, right, that you're not right for this job or that this was the wrong choice of you in this job, what we want to ask is what's more true about you not being right for the job and what's less true about you not being right for the job. And when we respond, when Jane responds, I'm going to ask her to focus on things that are oriented in data, specifics, and examples. So, Jane, do you have any examples or data that refutes the message of you're not the right person for this job?
And this is what Stacey's very good at, by the way, is she forces you to think of all those good things that you left behind in the luggage. Um, I guess I would say for the components of my job, working with a partner, the particular partner that I work with, I actually worked for the partner before, so I feel I have a very good view of how to work with them and partner with them. So in that way,
Hmm.
that would be something that would say, yes, I was probably a good candidate for the job, knowing how the partner works and having done work on the partner side.
Yeah, great. I'm actually typing this in too because I want people to get this. So when your inner critic says to you, "Gosh, maybe I'm not the right person for this job," a piece of data is, "Well, I used to actually work for this partner, so I was actually a good candidate. Other candidates may have not even worked for the partner, they may not have been familiar with that partner space. So that's a piece of data that says, yeah, I probably am a good fit for this job." Another piece of data, and then this is part of what I'll do with Jane. So this technique in particular is something that's really useful to do with somebody else. Have a friend, a coworker, or somebody help you talk through it. Because we're the ones stuck in the critic message, we often can't see past that. So having somebody else can be helpful. So sometimes I'll have to suggest things. We're doing this in a faster version. So I'm going to suggest to Jane that a piece of data is that you actually do have the job, right?
Yes.
So they did give you the job. These people that you're thinking are afraid that you're not right for the job, were they the ones who gave you the job?
Some of them, yes.
Yes. So a piece of data is that they actually gave you the job. Is there any other data to support why that you're doing a good job in this? Like, do you have good performance reviews? Do you get compliments from certain people? Do you?
I don't think the compliments don't come as often as you, or maybe I hear them through a different filter. And I don't know if
Hmm.
any of the other folks on the call are similar. They probably do, but I don't. I hear them through a filter that you pass it by very well, like, oh, that person was really nice. How nice, they're having a really good day. But I don't necessarily take any of the work that I do or something that helps somebody. I don't take as much and internalize and say, you know what, I did something that was very good for our partnership today, or I um, I I vocalized a situation that came true 6 months later and that people are now recognizing, oh my God, 6 months ago, she wasn't the craziest person in the room. Today she is, but 6 months. So that's
Right.
there are some examples of that, yeah.
Yeah. So in this situation, when I'm working with Jane, I'm actually going to hold her to get more specific, right? So she's still being a little bit general, right? Just a little. And I'm going to say, so what is a specific example of something you've done recently where that somebody appreciated it about you in the job you do?
So recently, yesterday, we had a quarterly business review, and
Hmm.
I literally had one line item that there was a pause, and my skip level said, "Hey, I just want to say that for all of you folks that are working on this one, you guys have done a great job in making a very complex situation simple and helped the organization rally around where we were going and what we were doing." I that I should have taken it and packaged it, recorded it, and then drank it this morning. But that was actually very positive.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. So for folks that are listening, this is where it's my job or somebody's job to work with you to get really specific, right? Because even before, they were good points that Jane was making, but when I push her to get very specific with an example, that example she can't refute. She can't refute that the leader said, "You guys have done a great job," right? So her rational brain, her inner critic's trying to refute it, but we've put something else up there to combat it, something very specific. And so that's when you're working with somebody else, and you can be a great dance partner with other peers and colleagues and help them in this. Very much a coaching standpoint of getting. So my job isn't just to root for Jane. Of course, I do root for Jane, but my job is to get Jane to recognize specific. Okay. So Jane, I also want to go down the path of I'm not. They think that I'm not the right person for this job. Is there anything specific or any example that might support the truth of that statement? Let's be risky here.
There is in that what I think about, and this is probably part the I think it's the comparer that
Hmm.
I look and I see other folks who I look at what they do and the teams that they lead and the work that they do and say, oh my gosh, the value that they are driving is tremendous. And I try to value what the work that I'm doing and say, is this as valuable as what they're doing? And maybe they're right. Somebody else could come in and extract more value out of this particular role.
Hmm. Right. So what you're thinking when you look at others and you're seeing the value impact that they are driving,
Yes,
and you're saying, "Gosh, maybe I'm not driving enough impact."
yes.
Okay. So I understand it, but do you have a specific example that supports that?
Uh,
Do you have any data behind that?
just specifics would be I'm an IC, I don't run a team, and I know that there's plenty of folks at my level that run very big teams, for example.
Okay. Okay. So the data that you're using to support that is that I'm an IC and people at my similar level have people reporting to them,
Correct.
right? And so they may be able to drive more value than I can drive,
Right.
right? Okay. So I'm going to do something here, folks. Watch this. I'm going to rechange the statement. So the statement that I hear you saying, Jane, is that people who have teams who aren't ICs are able to drive more value impact than I do. Is that what you're saying?
That's what it sounds like now.
She knows that I'm about to trick her. Is that 100% true?
No.
Really? So now part of what Jane and I would do is say, what's more or less true about that? So I'm not intentionally trying to trick Jane, but what I am trying to show is this is so good. Thank you, Jane, so much for helping this. Is how we can, within our own brain, we just start to circle it in and we start to build a story, right? And Jane has a couple of stories going on about one, that she's maybe not right for the job, two, that because she's an IC versus leading a team, that she has less impact. But when we try to put data and specifics underneath it, some of those things start to crumble and fall apart. Now, the other thing that I would be doing with Jane here, especially if we have more time, and maybe Jane, this might be what we do in the inner success version, is I would have Jane talk about specifically what her impact, her value impact has been as an IC. So that fits under the question, what is less true about what she just said, that you have to have a team to have the right impact. That parallels an exercise on the inner success side of the book um, about writing out what you've been specifically successful about and what you've been proud of. So Jane, get ready. That might happen on Saturday. As an IC, what have you done that's created specific value impact? And again, I would have her get very specific and use really detailed examples. Now, does this convince Jane that she's the right person for the job? Jane, does it always convince you that you're the right person?
What it typically does is it creates this seed that sits in my brain and germinates. So while I'm making dinner or I go for a run, all of a sudden all of these things start to come up saying, wait a second, Stacey's right, that's not necessarily true. What am I isn't it okay that I'm offering and doing these things? Isn't what I'm doing as a, for example, a problem solver? These are really tough problems that had they been so easy, somebody else would have done them by now. And even today, people don't quite understand how to solve them. And that's the exercise that'll come, and you guys probably experience the same thing. It comes back to you, and then you start to germinate on it, and it starts to grow on you. You start to recognize and start adding things on the positive side instead of just spiraling down, not on the not good enough side, and just add some things to reboost yourself into the that really isn't quite true.
Yeah, right. And I'm going to speak for Jane here. Jane, I definitely want you to chime in. This isn't easy. Like the Truth Series activity takes some discipline. It takes some work. It takes some effort. It's not one of those simple, easy things. You actually really have to practice it over and over again to start to integrate it inside yourself. And the hope is, what my goal is so in that we would have given Jane some homework around saying, okay, so when is the next time that you're most likely to have this message hit you? Like look into your calendar over the next couple of weeks. Do you see a couple of opportunities that the inner critic might take advantage of? And what are you going to do? Like plan for 2 of those. And what are you going to do? What are you going to talk to yourself about in the moment when the inner critic first hits, instead of, a day later when I come and coach? And so we set up some very tangible things for her to practice. And then when we come back together, we talk about it. And hopefully, as all of you know, like great learning and growth, if I had you guys talk about some of the most amazing, successful things, some of the places where you've learned the most, I could almost guarantee that 80% of you are going to not talk about happy times. You're going to talk about those really difficult moments when you sat through a tough time in your job, and on the other side, you came out of it, even though you went in thinking, God, this is horrible, I'm not good at my job. Over time, you really learned and figured out how to remind yourself you are strong, you do have incredible strengths, you do provide incredible value, and you're going to practice that. And so it does take time. I'm not going to lie to you guys, this is not the simple Dr. Phil answer. Or, sorry, Dr. Phil, nothing against you, um, but it is something to do with practice. And see, this is the great thing for me about women who work in the technical field. You're heavy hitters. You are willing to do the work and practice. Jane does the work. And, sometimes does she still have inner critic moments? Yes, absolutely. Do I still, I wrote a freaking book. I still have inner critic moments. But I have a lot less inner critic moments. Absolutely. I pull myself back to that positive space a lot faster. And if I am in one of those places where I do really get stuck, I now know the very specific things that I do to help pull myself out, which is usually talking to a friend or a peer or a colleague. And that's why I am so adamant about encouraging you guys in chat rooms, on Skype, in the Facebook page. Share about your inner critics and what's going on, because with other people around, you can help find what's more true. I know we only have 5 minutes, so I do want to open it up for questions if Deanna has gathered any. And there's never enough time to talk about this, but I hope that was helpful. Deanna, do we have any questions?
Stacey, I'm jumping on because this
Answering that
question's
today.
rather long, and I'm not sure if you can see it all.
Okay, hold on. There's more. Let me just
If you
read
want, I
this
can
to
read it to
myself.
you. Okay.
No, I'm reading it. I got it.
Okay, I'm going off air.
How practical can we get with this issue, as one issue that affects many women, leading to self-suppression and lower self-esteem, resulting in higher achievers and more non-achievers? So I think if I have it correctly, Lillian from Zimbabwe, hi, a marketing agent at Ocean Collective, that part of your question is that how practical is it that we can make some movement on the inner critic pieces? Um, and I would say, I don't know how easy it would be to bring Jane back on the line, but Lillian, I am, if nothing else, I'm a case study. I have had inner critics torment me for years. It's part of why I wrote the book, isn't just for my clients, for me. Um, and I absolutely have gained ground on my inner critic. I absolutely feel stronger about my success and about who I am and what I can offer. And if that weren't true, I wouldn't be even speaking on this video cam. My inner critics would have prevented me from even showing up in front of you. My inner critics, boy, I had the battle of a lifetime writing this book with some inner critics about putting what I believed out there. And I was still able to do it. So the one thing I can relate to you in terms of your question is that it's hard. And so sometimes it feels like there's no way to make inroads on it. And those emotions of feeling like it's overwhelming, they're absolutely true, and they can feel overwhelming. But if you do the work, you will for certain get better. I mean, think one thing I would tell you to think about is all of you probably studied very hard in your education to do what you're doing now. And both your education in life and your education in the academic realm, where you went into classes and you did not know anything about them. And now you know them so well. Well, what you did was you made a discipline of learning something new. And this is no different than that. You have to learn it. You have to practice it. It'll be uncomfortable because you won't understand, but you absolutely can make inroads. Now, I know we're almost at the end here, so I love to take questions. I'll be back to do a presentation on Saturday. Feel free to send me questions, or if you send them to Deanna, I'd be happy to target them. And Jane will be back on Saturday, and we're going to actually do that exercise. I think we found the perfect exercise. Thank you again, Jane, for being willing to put yourself out there in front of folks. Deanna, I'm going to turn it back to you for the closing.
Okay, well, that was an amazing session, and what a great way to start Voices is to talk about our own inner voices and what we can do to diffuse them.
Yeah,
So
we
I
have to
think
use our voices. We have to use our
absolutely.
voices.
Absolutely. And thank you, Jane, so much. We had some technical difficulties with Jane, but I was so glad that she was able to jump in there and hey, the technology works. So I think this is a good sign of things to come. And I hope you will join Stacey and Jane. And I hope many of you will also join the conversation, as Stacey said. And I'm looking it up real quick so that I can tell you when she's going to be on next. She will be on session 28. So if you're looking at the program that you all received when you registered for Voices, her session is session 28, and we hope to continue this conversation then. In the meantime, I hope that you will join us for Vanessa Solikowski, who is doing amazing work over at Cisco on enabling workplace transformation through activity-based networking. I think this is really the wave of the future of how we work. and she's going to be doing a presentation here now. So if you go back to your homepage, bookmark that page so that you can join her session now. We would love to see you over there. Stacey, as always, I learned something new and amazing every time we speak. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you. Have fun
All
today.
right. All right, we're ending this. Have fun, everybody. See you at the next session.